Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Well, I wondered if this was a particularly good idea, but I've got the comic now, and I'm recording, so I might as well start talking. We're going to take a look today at an issue of Sandman, written by Neil Gaiman, of course, in which a writer takes possession of a woman and treats her like a piece of meat and then eventually gets his comeuppance. So given the events surrounding Neil Gaiman at this time, sensitive subject matter, so naturally you want the guy who's got like 60 plus videos about Rob Liefeld at Extreme Studios to take a crack at it. By the way, there's a playlist of those if you haven't already availed yourself. So we're taking a look today at Sandman number 17 by Neil Gaiman and Kelly Jones. But just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go over and subscribe on my Patreon. Links are in the description, gives you early access to everything I do, helps out the channel, helps to buy new comics. So if you're aware at all about what's been going on with Neil Gaiman, you kind of know the deal. There's been all sorts of accusations that have been levied against him in the last few weeks. It's not something that I've been super interested in, but it definitely arched an eyebrow when I first heard about it. But we might as well go over them real quick just to get it out of the way. Neil Gaiman has been accused and sued now for sexual assault, coercion, and human trafficking, which apparently that's the first time I'm hearing about that one. And it's tough to know where to stand when you hear about this kind of stuff. Obviously there's a bunch of accusations flying around, and the sheer weight of them should be enough to convince anybody that, this guy's just a creep and he should be locked away and just so we don't ever have to think about him again. But on the other side, we're just taking people's word for it, right? And it's happened in the past where people have been falsely accused of this kind of shit. So generally speaking, when I see this kind of stuff pop up, I just go, man, hope that works out for somebody. And I keep my nose out of it. I don't do news. I don't do opinion pieces. I don't do think pieces. I don't do documentaries where I try to present you with the facts. I'm certainly not going to try and convince anybody of anything for this video. But what I do is I go over comic books in a little bit too much detail, particularly comics from the 90s. So let's do that today. So yeah, we're looking at Sandman number 17. This is part of the Dream Country series, which is 4 self-contained issues, one after the other, one of which won Neil Gaiman, I think it was an Eagle Award for Dream of a Thousand Cats. There's also Midsummer Night's Dream and Facade. So, it's a very good 4 issues of comic books. Like, we shouldn't forget the fact that Neil Gaiman is exceptionally good at writing comic books. Neil Gaiman influenced a whole generation of writers, either through Sandman or through the American Gods stuff or whatever else he was writing. He hooked into the whole goth, witchy thing right when it was gaining steam, and he rode that shit to superstardom. And tucked into the Dream Country collection is this one issue, Calliope, which I don't think has been talked about a ton before, a month or two ago. It's a good issue. I've read it several times. It's an unpleasant issue, but very well written, very succinct, great art by Kelly Jones. This is some of Kelly Jones' best stuff, I think. And I can just probably stop filibustering and get right into the issue. So why don't we do that? We can start with the cover. Cover, of course, by Dave McKean. I believe all the covers to the Sandman were by Dave McKean. I don't always understand what he's doing with his covers, but they're generally very attractive. Looking at this here, I remember thinking, that's probably just a peacock feather that Dave McKean had in his house. But upon closer inspection, no, I'm pretty sure that's painted. And very good figure. Doesn't really evoke anything for me, but I'm sure it does for somebody. But Dave McKean has never been my particular cup of tea. I don't go much for the whole abstract, metaphorical kind of stuff. So we're going to start out May of 1986 with our, I won't say protagonist, but this is the main character of this particular story. This is Richard Maddock saying, "I don't have any idea," which is something he will say again towards the end of the issue. So Richard Maddock is in the home of this doctor that he knows, and he's purchasing this glump of hair and just like digestive fluid from him. And this is something that he's been looking for some time. The doctor says this is called a trichonobizor or trichonobizor. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Which he cut out of the stomach of a young woman, he says, because she had been chewing on her hair and swallowing it, and it just kind of coagulated. Might actually be a real thing, I'm not for sure. But Richard Maddock takes it from the doctor and, asks him, what do I owe you? And he's like, oh, nothing. I would have just thrown it in the garbage, or it would have been some kind of curiosity for med students going forward. You can sign this book here, though. So right on the first page, we know that Richard Maddock is a writer, although we have no idea why he would want a clump of hair and mucus. We're not really getting creepy vibes off of Richard Maddock yet, other than what Kelly Jones is doing with the art. And Kelly Jones is doing a lot in this issue. Kelly Jones is going pure rights in on this. Which he often does. But it feels like he really leaned into it on this one. Like going heavy blacks on the shadows. Like, look at all the stuff he's making up in the sleeve here. This is, like, it's not even remotely what folds look like, but it looks awesome anyway. I don't care. I think this is maybe just like a couple of years before he started doing the covers to Batman. And I feel like that was where he kind of, staked his claim. So we're going to get a little bit of background here about Richard Maddock. Naturally the Doctor asks him, why do you even want this? And Maddock is like, well, you know how you were asking about where writers get their ideas from, so this kind of thing is just research for me. And as the Doctor's on his way out the door, Maddock gets a phone call, turns out it's from his agent, who's getting on his back about the next book that he's supposed to put out. Because he's put out one successful book, it turns out, called The Cabaret of Dr. Caligari. Sure, why not? And he's got this sequel that he's supposed to be finishing up. And it turns out he's 9 months past the deadline. And now the publishers are saying that he's in breach of contract, and if he doesn't produce something quickly, they're going to have to take legal action. So he gets his agent off his back as well as he can, just saying, oh yeah, no, it just needs a few more pages and then it'll be done. But really what the case is that he has absolutely nothing. He's gone basically a year without writing anything of any kind of worth. And now he's desperate. So desperate that he's going to take some drastic measures. He's going to head across town to visit another writer. One he doesn't really know particularly well. Neither of them really like each other, but this is Erasmus Fry, who was a popular writer in the 30s and 40s, and it seems that Maddock has made a deal, and the Trichinobezoar is part of it. Incidentally, the script for this issue was in the trade paperback for Dream Country. I think it's the only Neil Gaiman script I've ever seen, and he goes very much in detail. This is everything that happens on this page. This is everything that happens in this panel. So everything we're getting here is directed, including this wordless shot here of him just walking along the coast. Odd panel. Interesting shadow work that Kelly Jones is doing, of course, as usual. I'm pretty sure some of this stuff is referenced. I think this one and probably that one as well. That one, maybe not so much. That looks like his forehead just kind of shrank in between that one and that one. But Kelly Jones doesn't worry too much about proportion. He's more about, am I having fun with this drawing, which I can certainly appreciate. So they step into Erasmus Fry's house, and Erasmus is going to just bloviate for a little while. He lives on his own. He doesn't have anybody he talks to, and he's an asshole. So when somebody does come into his house, he doesn't miss an opportunity to talk their ear off. So here he's talking about what exactly a bezoar is. So it's meant to be sort of a ward against poisons and, probably just bad luck in general or bad magic. And he rambles on and on about it. And eventually Richard Maddock can't take any more of it. And it's just like, do you have any idea how bad this writer's block shit is? I can't think of anything. I've got deadlines that I'm way past. And Erasmus Fry, of course, is a writer. He's like, of course I do. Shut your stupid mouth. And demands his payment for what he's going to be selling to Richard Maddock. And of course the payment is the Trichinobezoar. He knows immediately what it is. And he says he's going to add it to the collection, which, so he's got a few of these. And then he's going to guide Richard Maddock to what he's purchased. And in this case, that turns out to be Calliope, who was the youngest of the muses. So Maddock has gotten so desperate that he's inquired around. He's found out about Erasmus Fry, and I guess he met him and found out about the muse that he had captive and has held captive for about 55 years, I guess, at this point. And that got Fry his career. Now that he's, getting older, he's nearing the end of his life, he's decided to sell her off to Maddock. Or maybe it's Maddock. It might be Maddock. That makes more sense. And in the notes for the script here, apparently the first draft of this particular page, where we first see Calliope, Kelly Jones went a little bit nuts with the ribs, where she just looked like emaciated, which seems like a very Kelly Jones thing to do. But awesome page, like very striking, whole ton of black. So at first Calliope is like, okay, what's this about? Am I performing for this guy? What's the deal here? Because she's used to Erasmus Fry just completely abusing and mistreating her. And Fry's like, nope, that's not the deal this time. I'm actually selling you to him. So you're going to go with him, and you can help him with his career and just get the hell out of my sight. And apparently he told her, long before, that once he'd gotten all the success he needed, when he was nearing the end of his life, he'd release her. He's like, yeah, well, I lie. Writers lie. That's how it goes. And then Maddock takes her out of the house and over to his place. Again, there's good expressions. I like the expression here from Maddock, where he's looking at her with interest, but also he's not sure exactly how to act around her. So now we're going to get into it. Maddock takes her to his home. He's got a room set up for her in the attic. And naturally, the first thing he does is takes her by force. So right off the bat, we may have been kind of on the fence about how to feel about this guy up until now. Okay, you can kind of anybody who's ever tried to write anything can sympathize with somebody who's having a complete lack of inspiration. And this guy's gone to great lengths to try and alleviate that. And it's like, well, okay, well, it depends, I guess, on how he's going to treat her. And it's like, oh, okay. So we can hate this guy and we can root for him to eventually get his comeuppance. And then afterwards, he goes back downstairs. Doesn't feel any different at first, but then something kind of clicks in his head and he starts writing, and he's writing all night. And it turns out that what he's written is this second novel that he owes to his publishers. And wild panel up here, eh? This is all the stuff here that he's doing with the shading. I'm guessing this is all inked over because it almost looks like scratchboard. Like, I don't know if you ever use scratchboard, where it's just a white board that's covered in ink and you're just supposed to scrape off the lines. I think what he did here was he inked it and then he went further than he had to, and then he scratched off some of the ink. Either, I don't imagine it was a mistake. It looks like it was completely on purpose. That'd be something if it was, though, eh? Like, just like, oh shit, I went too far with the blacks. Better scrape some of it off. Oh my god, that looks so much better. That's the only panel in this issue that looks like that, though. So next, Calliope is going to pray to the Fates, essentially, the three ladies, which is something that comes up again and again and again in Sandman, and kind of reaches its peak in the Kindly Ones. And she's asking them to intervene on her behalf, but Maddock hasn't done anything wrong, at least as far as observing the rules go. In terms of capturing a muse, it's all been done correctly. Same with the guy who captured her first, Erasmus Fry. So they can't step in on her behalf. Which is another theme that runs throughout Sandman. Just, like, I guess the magical world, but I imagine there's some stuff about transgressing just societal norms. That kind of, like, I haven't read it in a long time. It'd be kind of interesting to do a relook at that, actually. So anyway, yeah, the Fates can't help. There are no gods who can help because the gods have basically mostly faded away. Anybody who's left doesn't have any real power to help her in this case. The only thing that could help would be the Endless, which are, of course, Morpheus and his family. And we find out here that Morpheus and Calliope were lovers once. They had a kid, that was Orpheus. So there's a connection there. The only problem is that, of course, at this time, Morpheus is also imprisoned. So really, there's nobody that can help. She's just kind of stuck here. She's got to endure it. We flash back to when Erasmus Fry first captured her, when she was bathing on Mount Helicon, and she had set her scroll down, which I guess kind of represents ownership. It's a whole mythical thing. I don't know exactly how that works. And a young Erasmus Fry had hunted her down, came to her with a bough of moly, which was necessary for binding her, I believe, and grabbed her scroll, said, "What's your name?" She says, "Calliope." He's like, "Oh, well, that's nice. Well, you can call me Master." He's like, "Oh, that sounds familiar." And then sets her scroll on fire, and from then on, he has ownership of her. And then at the bottom of the page here, Maddock comes back into the room. He's super happy because he's done a second draft of his second novel in a very short time. And he wants to celebrate with some sex with his captive. And Calliope's like, "Wow, that's great. So now that you have what you want, you mind letting me go?" And he's like, "Oh, God, no. No, you're sticking around, and we're going to play this out." So again, just kind of sealing in the fact we're not supposed to sympathize with Maddock at all in this story. And yeah, Kelly Jones's rendition of Calliope is pretty off-putting, which, it's supposed to be. She looks haggard. She looks underfed. She looks like somebody who's been through hell and back. Hey, check it. RoboCop 2's coming out soon. I bet that's going to be just as good as the first one. I know there are some people who do like the second one almost as or as much as the first one. I haven't sat through the whole thing myself. I've seen scenes. It looks like fun, but, I'm good. First RoboCop is one of my favorite movies of all time. If I need a RoboCop movie, I just watch the first RoboCop. All right, so back to Richard Maddock. We're in May of 1987, so we're about a year after he first acquired Calliope. And it's been a busy year for Richard Maddock. We're at the release of his second book here called And My Love She Gave Me Light, which is the end of a riddle Neil Gaiman likes. We've got Richard Maddock down here speaking with a female fan who's just gushing about the female characters in his novel. And he's saying about how, he's always considered himself a feminist author, while he's meanwhile got a muse captive in his attic, which is a little ironic in retrospect, seeing as how, Neil Gaiman was widely considered a feminist author up until a little while ago. And then just, brief snippets over the next year or so, where his book is being adapted into a movie and he's trying to negotiate screenwriter credit, and his agent won't have anything to do with it. Another one a little later where he's speaking with somebody and discussing an epic poem that he's written recently. And then a little bit later where he's on the phone with his agent and saying how he's had to move to a bigger firm because they can give him better opportunities. So quickly moving up in the world. A few months later, he's writing a play. A couple months after that, the studio is offering to let him write a screenplay for his movie just so they can keep him, but it's a little too late because he's already moved on to a different producer in the States. and nobody can stop the Rick Maddock train. A little bit later on, this is September of 1989, where he's a guest on a morning show talking about the new film that he's directing. So in just, 2 or 3 short years, he's gone from being absolutely nobody, a guy with a book and a huge chunk of writer's block, to being the hottest writer out of England. And a little bit later on, when just a poster for the movie that he's directed, called And the Madness of Crowds, where it's been nominated for 3 Oscars, including Best Original Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Picture. So now we're in mid-1990, and we're going to come back to Calliope here. And Calliope has a visitor, and it's, obviously Morpheus, judging by the word balloon. So Morpheus has now escaped from captivity and found out about Calliope and come to visit her. And Calliope just begs him to, please convince Maddock to let her go. I do love how much black Kelly Jones uses on a page. He's not afraid to just bury somebody in black. And back to Rick Maddock, who's on another review show where they're talking about people he could be compared with, like Jean Cocteau or maybe Clive Barker. Clive Barker also did the writer to director thing. He also did plays. He was very prolific. Jesus Christ, Clive Barker's 72 now, eh? But anyway, this guy thinks he's clever, and he's dug up somebody who may be even a better comparable for Rick Maddock in Erasmus Fry, who's another guy who wrote towering romances. And he specifically refers to him as the late Erasmus Fry. And this is the first time that Rick is hearing about this, so it kind of knocks him for a bit of a loop. So later on, he's having a chat with the host. They're just getting lunch or whatever. And, Rick decides to press him a little bit about Erasmus Fry, just find out what exactly happened. He's like, oh, I guess it must have been old age, right? He was pretty old, last I heard. And he's like, oh no, it actually turns out he poisoned himself. Which is a little bit strange considering, he was a hoarder of bezoars. That should have been theoretically impossible, unless he was just kind of testing the theory. I'm not a big fan of what he's doing with the cross-hatching here. Going very sloppy with it. Personally, I'm of the opinion, if you're going to do that kind of cross-hatching, over that large a space, use a ruler. Or, get Gerhard to do it. That'll work too. But, great lighting on the central image, at least here. And so later on, Rick Maddock goes home feeling, I'm sure, very strange. Everything's kind of been rolling along and nothing's really kind of gotten in his way. And this has kind of just knocked him for a little bit of a loop briefly. And finds that somebody has gotten into his house. And of course, it's Morpheus. It's a little interesting seeing Morpheus show up very briefly. But that's not really uncommon in Sandman, particularly in these self-contained single issues. And Maddock immediately, of course, demands that he get out of his house. Morpheus is like, no, I don't think so. I know about the woman you're keeping upstairs, and I've come to request that you set her free. So he's being polite about it, at least. Awesome shot with the close-up on the eyes, and just, all this blackness here. And the colors isn't, I don't know, I feel like the color of the jacket here almost doesn't work because the black isn't 100% black, not like this. It feels a little washed out. That might just be the copy I've got. Awesome looking folds, though, again, where it feels like it's just squirming almost. And Maddock at first tries to stall, say, no, I don't even know what you're talking about, with no response from Morpheus, and he just, pretty much abandons it immediately because Morpheus is just, he's not acting like he suspects, he's just like, no, I know you have her, just let her go. And Maddock refuses because, everything's going well for him for once. He's right at the peak of his career. If he lets her go, all of a sudden, he's not going to have the same ideas anymore, and he's going to be expected to produce more of the same kind of work, and he'll just be unable. So he's like, maybe in a year or so, which sounds very similar to probably what Erasmus Fry promised to her. Just, really soon. Just not right now. So he would have done exactly the same thing. And of course, this offends Morpheus greatly. The idea of him just keeping this entity captive because he needs ideas. And he's like, you know what? You picked the wrong guy to say that to, buddy. I'm going to give you all the ideas you can handle. Which is an interesting, turnaround for a writer. And then Maddock wakes up. So it was all a dream after all. Immediately goes upstairs to check in with Calliope, and he's like, do you know anything about this dream I just had? Is this you? Were you giving me nightmares? Doing some great uplighting here, very Wrightson-esque, of course. And Calliope's like, nope, that wasn't me. That was my baby daddy, and you've kind of pissed him off. Which kind of knocks Maddock back again, where he's just like, I didn't know you had a son. It's like, well, no, you don't know anything about me. As she says here, I'm more than just a receptacle for your seed or an inspiration for your tales. Still, no use worrying about that now. A little bit too late, so just go enjoy your party. I'm sure I'll see you soon. A little bit later, Maddock goes down to the news vendor and just, engaged in a little bit of small talk, but that all of a sudden starts snowballing in his head. He just mentions the party he's going to, which kicks off an idea about a party during an apocalypse, and then that starts spiraling into other ideas. Very Neil Gaiman sounding ideas. If you read Sandman, like the entirety of it, you'd see this kind of thing a lot, like two old women taking a weasel on holiday. Griffins shouldn't marry, vampires don't dance, a man who inherits a library card to the library in Alexandria, a rosebush, a nightingale, and a black rubber dog collar. Like, these aren't ideas, exactly. These are more just like weird idiosyncratic statements that you could maybe incorporate into something somewhere, but I think you'd have to really stretch it to make it work with anything. But, awesome artwork by Kelly Jones here. Love the deep, deep shadows and the treatment he's got going on with, I assume this is white media. And then we're a little while later, and a little bit of a crowd is gathered, including the Doctor from the beginning of the story. And we've got our jagged panels, and they're really strange panel configurations, so everything's just kind of falling apart for Maddock. It's all very chaotic. The Doctor takes Maddock, takes him back to his place, and his hands are just absolutely demolished, turns out. Since he didn't have a pen and paper, he had to get the words out, so he just used his fingers on the brick wall. Doctor keeps trying to give him drugs. He's like, good God, no. Then I just fall asleep, and then who knows how bad that would be. And it's just this constant swirl of ideas. So all he can think of to do is tell the Doctor, please just go to my house. There's a woman upstairs. I'm holding her prisoner. Don't ask me about it right now. It's very complicated. Just go there and tell her that she's free, please. And he keeps muttering on his little idea fragments throughout. So the Doctor does just that. He goes to Richard Maddock's estate, because, Richard Maddock is filthy frickin' rich now. Goes up to the attic door, knocks on it and says, Rick said you're free now. But when he goes inside, nobody's there. Just a copy of Erasmus Fry's book that Rick Maddock liked. And then he leaves again, job done. And after he leaves, Calliope and Morpheus just going to have a quick goodbye. Calliope's been restored to her, full muse form now. She says how, in the old days, Morpheus would not have come back and saved her. He would have let her rot. But, of course, Morpheus has tasted his own captivity recently. So he's a little bit more sympathetic about this kind of thing. And then it ends with Calliope suggesting, maybe we should, get together sometime. Maybe I could visit you at your place. And Morpheus is just like, that sounds like a bad idea. And then he just teleports away with a nice little cross-hatching teleporting effect. Colorist is helping out on that, too. It's good stuff. And then back to Richard Maddock. The Doctor returns, and Maddock has calmed down because all of a sudden, all of the ideas have vanished. And not just the ones that Morpheus instilled in him recently, obviously all of Calliope's ideas as well, and any ounce of creativity he had before that, you get the feeling. To the point now where he's almost incapable of stringing together a coherent sentence. Which is an apt punishment, I think. And of course it ends with Maddock saying, I've got no idea at all, reflecting the first panel in the issue. And we get the nice little slowdown here with, get a panel with Maddock and then Morpheus slowly kind of drifting away. Great looking stuff. So yeah, that's it for Sandman number 17. Like I said, it's a good story. It's a good, kind of horror story-ish. Great art, and now kind of, sullied. Because, while it seemed at first that Neil Gaiman had just kind of crafted this kind of gross tale about a contemptible writer who will stop at nothing to become successful, now there's this element of okay, so how much did you want to be Rick Maddock in this situation? Is this a case of the writer's thinly veiled fetish? Because it kind of seems like it. Now, I don't know if that was the case exactly. I mean, at this point, when he's writing this, he's 29 or 30. He's not a big name in comics just yet. He's getting there, but he's still just a rising star, really. And nowhere near being famous outside of comics yet. So it wouldn't be a case of, this is what I like to do in my spare time. There's no way that he would have had that kind of clout yet. Fast forward 30 years, maybe a little bit more, So yeah, that's probably going to be the last time I read that issue because now that's kind of gross. Depending on how this one does, I might do another Sandman issue again in the future. I've got at least one more that I'd like to touch on. But when I bought it, none of this shit had come down. Or at least it was all background stuff. Now it's oh, well, I mean, at least this issue's still good, but maybe nobody wants to hear about this now. I don't know. So I'll think about that for the future. But for this one anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.